As you well know, these are difficult times for our country and the planet. It's easy to be frightened, discouraged, and even despairing. Now is the time to step up with courage, creativity, and hope. This video is my contribution, and I ask that you take the time to view it. It is organized into 8 modules, each building on the previous one and each about 5 minutes long. It concludes with a specific, achievable action. It looks at the big picture and tells a big story, so please allow me the time and space to tell the story properly. I guarantee that it will be interesting and hopeful. Thank you in advance. Module 1. This is a very quick spin through human history, focusing on some key points. I think most people are familiar with the latest theories in anthropology about human origins on this planet. We go back 2 or 3 million years or so, and for most of that time we were just another species among millions on this planet, not really significant in the big picture. We were a modest-sized member of the ape family, not especially big, strong, or fast compared to other mammals. We had large brains and dexterous hands and were good with tools, but until about 70,000 years ago, were not that big a deal, quite frankly. Just another ape among many. But around that time, our brains developed the ability to conceive abstractions, to imagine scenarios other than just the here and now, to create stories, essentially. We became able to think about the past and project into the future. This was an extraordinary advantage, as it allowed us to make plans involving larger and larger numbers of people. Among other benefits, this coordination of effort, teamwork, was effective in procuring food, allowing us to hunt animals that were much bigger and stronger. It also made for greater communication and cooperation with people outside an individual tribe, leading to increased trade and prosperity. It also allowed for abstractions like money, objects that represented value that would be honored and accepted among many different tribes. As interactivity became the norm, human settlements grew in size, becoming much larger than the tribal villages that had been the norm for the previous million years. In a typical tribe numbering around 200 or so, people were ethnically similar and would know personally everyone they encountered, fostering trust and cooperation. But with these much larger settlements, where most people were not familiar with each other, there needed to be other ways of binding people together and aligning their energies. So the stories expanded to encompass language, culture, spirituality, and religion, whatever was needed to make people feel connected in greater ways. And laws, stories about behavior and consequences, were added, evolving all the way to city-states and nations, from groups of thousands to groups of millions of people, all feeling connected to one another in some way through a narrative. And here we are today, the most powerful and dominant species on the planet, not because of our individual prowess, but because of our ability to work together in huge numbers. And the key to aligning our energies is our ability to create, communicate, and believe in stories. Because really, the United States, and all other countries, is just a story. The boundary lines are not real. We just made them up. They have no effect on wind, weather, or any other living species. They are just a good way to organize our society. And all laws are the same. When I was growing up, the USSR was very formidable and seemed very real. Then, within a short time, it all fell apart. The land and the people did not immediately change, but the way they thought about themselves, the way they aligned their energies did, and things were radically different. It's not that laws and countries are not important. They are extremely important. In the past 70,000 years, we have evolved from small tribes to a literal worldwide interdependent means of support. We depend on the cooperation and labor of millions of people for almost everything in our lives. The stories that make this interactivity and cooperation possible are critical to our survival, but in essence they are just stories, pervasive yet ephemeral, powerful but vulnerable to very rapid change. They only exist in our collective minds. Module 2, Flow. Imagine a science fiction movie in which a spacecraft visits Earth 1,000 years in the future and comes upon some ruins. Among the artifacts is a canister of movie film, the old 35mm type. Imagine them trying to decipher what this is all about by looking at the thousands of individual frames. Sure, they could get some kind of idea, but it would be very limited. But then suppose they find a movie projector and somehow figure out how to use it, and they see this. Okay, that's pretty silly, even for science fiction, but I think you get the idea. It would be a whole new dimension of experience and understanding, giving them insights they could never get from just looking at the stills. And that's the main point of this module. We humans are very visual beings. Eyesight is our dominant sense, as opposed to, say, dogs, who rely primarily on hearing and smell. But sight is an on-off phenomenon. Either you see something, or you don't. Light does not linger like smell or bend around corners like sound. It's there and then it's gone. The expression out of sight, out of mind refers to this. Add to this our human tendency to separate and categorize things, breaking them down into smaller and smaller components, and it seems clear to me that we humans tend to experience the world and remember things primarily as a series of still photos, similar to the movie film model, and that we focus mostly on the surface of things where the light can shine, and not behind or below, where most of the substance usually is. The key point is that life is flow, endlessly in motion, dynamic, interactive. Yet we tend to experience it, remember it, and talk about it as if it were separate parts interacting periodically. This can be very limiting, and we can go beyond it. Imagine your cliched bored teenager. My life is like so dull. Nothing is happening. Of course, if we choose to think about it, we know that even in the most inert person, there is an extraordinary amount happening. Heart beating, blood circulating, food digesting, cells reproducing, etc., etc., all interconnected, in communication, and working together 24/7. Like all living beings, this girl is a nexus of miracles. But on one level, and only one, she's bored. When we go to the grocery store, we focus on the specific items we need to buy. For example, should I get boneless chicken thighs or ones with the bone in? Again, if we choose to think about it, we know that there is a vast infrastructure that allows us to get food this way, from farms to inspections, to packaging, to transportation, to retailing, etc., etc., worldwide, involving thousands, if not millions of people. And one more example. Think about how you're able to use your cell phone or view this video. A worldwide network of satellites, receivers, servers, etc., etc. Think of the collaboration and coordination it takes to create and maintain all this from people all over the world. And you can receive a call when you've got your phone in your back pocket and you're sitting on it, which means that the signals must be passing through your body, along with radio beams and who knows what else. Talk about TMI. So in summary, we evolved as a common member of the ape family living in small tribes. Then at some point, developed the intellectual ability to create stories which allowed us to work together in ever-increasing numbers. This cooperation and specialization increased our prosperity, lifespan, and population, and our life support system has grown to a completely interdependent worldwide network. As part of all this, we've become less and less directly connected to this life support system, and because of our human perception, are less likely to be aware of its constant flow. But it's always there, always flowing, and is truly our bottom line. Module 3, Government. The Constitution of the United States was signed in 1787, 238 years ago. In it, the founders wrote that the purpose of government, in essence, was securing fundamental individual rights, as well as the rights of the people as a whole to govern themselves. It's not surprising that individual rights would be prominent, as that's where most people start when they think of democracy. And of course, each of us sees ourselves as a separate individual. But again, if we choose to, we can look deeper. We know that there is a so-called hierarchy of needs, which illustrates the obvious fact that having adequate food, shelter, and clothing is fundamental to everything in our lives. If you're starving, you can't think about individual rights and social justice. So this is the true foundation. Now, this fact is alluded to in phrases like the common good and the economy, but I feel that these and similar terms are equivalent to looking at the still frames in the film, so to speak, and do not convey what is really happening in the movie, the interdependent flow. And that's a big problem, because if you don't acknowledge what's really going on, it's hard to improve things. Here is what I believe to be a more accurate definition of the purpose of government, one that can give a fresh perspective. Creating and managing the narratives that bind us together in our worldwide interdependent life support network. This is the true bottom line, making sure we have our basic needs met so we can build the type of society that we want. If government doesn't do this, all the rest won't happen. In 1787, people were breaking free from an oppressive monarchy system, and individual rights were a new and inspiring concept, very prominent in their thinking. And while there was much interdependent economic activity, it was only a fraction of what we have today. The stereotype of the independent American was somewhat true in 1787, as over 90% of people were engaged in farming and could theoretically support themselves at some level without government stories to collectively align them with each other. Today that figure is 2%, and independent survival is literally impossible. Let me continue this new perspective with a metaphor, the human body. This can be seen as a collection of separate parts, heart, brain, liver, etc., but these can only survive and thrive in the context of the whole body. All the parts are connected by the circulatory system driven by the heart. This system is designed to operate at a certain pace, blood pressure, body temperature, and this can best be shown by the familiar bell curve. There is an optimum range and the dangerous extremes, too low and too high. The body has a holistic intelligence which constantly monitors this circulatory process and keeps it within the optimum range. We're all familiar with what our body does when we get too cold, preserving body heat, or too hot, sweating to cool down. We don't have to do this consciously, as there is a subconscious, or perhaps better called superconscious, wisdom operating to our benefit. I don't think it's a stretch at all to say our society is a vast human body composed of individual parts, people, which can only survive and thrive in the context and support of the whole. We are all connected by our interdependent life support system, and this flow is regulated by the narratives of governments. This body also has an optimum range and dangerous extremes. The ideal role of government is to be the superconscious intelligence that keeps us all in the optimum range. So let's diagram the various forms of government on a graph, with one direction democracy and the other totalitarianism, and see how they go about their tasks. Let's say this endpoint is pure democracy, where everyone votes on everything. It's obvious that for any kind of large group, particularly a country, this would be impractical, as it would take too long to make decisions and slow down the flow to dangerous levels. Let's say the other end is pure totalitarianism, a dictatorship. This system, among many faults, can suffer from too quick decision-making, whimsical, erratic, without collective wisdom. This is also a dangerous extreme. What seems to work best for the optimum is what we have in the US and many other countries around the world: representative democracy, where all the people vote to elect certain representatives to do the bulk of the decision-making. Ideally, this can provide the proper balance of speed and collective wisdom to keep the life support network flowing smoothly. But there's no guarantee of this. Like the human body, which is constantly reacting to external conditions and working to keep its systems in the optimum range, democracy is an ongoing process of making sure the interdependent flow of life support is working properly. And it's not easy. The farther it goes out of balance, usually toward the too low, too slow side, the more the collective wisdom needs to pull to the other side to bring it back into balance. In other words, if a democratic government becomes polarized and stagnant, it opens the door for a dictator. Sound familiar? The recent 2024 election and current political situation has been a nonstop media onslaught, and the quote story typically plays as a moral melodrama. Good versus evil, rich versus poor, kindness versus heartlessness, smart people, us, versus dumb people, them, depending on your point of view. Almost always focusing on separate individuals and the supposed conflict between them, like a typical movie. Which, in my opinion, is exactly what it all is, but most people are only looking at the film strips. The flow is the real story, a tale of democracy which had moved out of its optimum range. How this happened and how to restore its effectiveness is probably the most important knowledge we can get right now. There are many factors, but I think one of the most significant is what I call the compassion trap. Module 4, the compassion trap. In my working career, I have been exposed to many trainings on how to be more efficient and productive, and have read many books like these. What they all have in common is really just common sense, that when you have a lot of things to do, the best way to proceed is to prioritize. Rank your tasks in order of importance, then work on the most important ones first, and make sure they get done before going on to other things. This diagram with the 4 quadrants is a good illustration. Now, this can sound simple and reasonable, but, as we all know, in a multitasking environment, it's easy to get distracted and caught up in responding to each incoming email, fighting fires all day long, and ending up accomplishing very little except increasing your stress level. Thus the need for the books and trainings. But as is usually the case, the devil is in the details. How do you prioritize? What criteria will you use? This can be difficult enough in business, but what about the government of a country of 330 million very diverse people? How do you determine what's most important? How do you rank your tasks? Well, let's give it a try. Let's start with the goal of the greatest good for the greatest number, and make a list of issues with the approximate percentage of people who would be significantly affected by them. Now, this will be just my best estimates from available information, but I think it will serve to make a good point. All right, let's start with climate change. Let's say that's 100% of the people. And the economy, let's say the top 25% of wage earners or rich people will probably be less affected, so 75% will be significantly affected. Healthcare, the same general idea. Reproductive rights, 50% of the population is women. There are 14% of people in the country who identify as black. Veterans, 6%. LGBTQ is about 4%. Transgender, about 0.2%. Does this make you feel uncomfortable? It certainly does me. First off, you can make a case that many more people are affected by all these issues than just the specific population groups. And what about historical injustice against black people and the sacrifices of our veterans? Shouldn't that be taken into consideration? And how can you say that someone is less important just because there are numerically fewer of them? Etc., etc. 2 pillars of democracy are the concepts of one person, one vote, and equal treatment under the law. All people matter, and all people are equal. With this perspective, it is very difficult to prioritize, no matter what criteria you use. And the more progressive the thinking, as I've experienced it, the more compassionate and inclusive. I mean, it just feels right to invite everyone into the group and treat them all with equal respect and attention, doesn't it? But isn't this essentially the opposite of what all the efficiency trainings say? The biggest threat to democracy is its inherent tendency toward inefficiency. The more people you recognize and involve, the longer it takes to make decisions. And the more compassionate and inclusive you are, well, it can seem like a trap. But that's only from one point of view. That's why it's crucial to have another perspective. Module 5, The Shift. In the United States in the year 1900, if you got sick, a doctor would likely have come to your home. This would have been the town doctor, and often the only one, a general practitioner who would treat you for almost everything and who would have probably known you personally. In the year 2000, if you got sick, you would have had to go to your GP, if you were lucky enough to have one, who would likely have referred you to a specialist, heart, kidney, skin, liver, etc. This was, by and large, a very positive development, as medical knowledge and treatments increased and improved so much that specialists were needed to keep up with them. But like all good things, it had a downside. By 2000, medical care had become so specialized that each discipline was almost in its own silo, so to speak, with each doctor focusing primarily on his or her area, often not aware of what other doctors were doing with the same patient. And as you would expect, problems arose. Medicines prescribed by one specialist would sometimes conflict with those prescribed by others, with very negative consequences for the patient. Disagreements about treatment caused confusion, etc. From one point of view, this could seem like an intractable problem, with well-intentioned specialists, often with big egos, fighting it out for dominance of their particular solutions. But it hasn't worked out that way, because of a change in perspective, point of view. Instead of seeing the individual parts first, as the bottom line, the doctor shifted to view the body first, and see the individual parts in the context of the whole. This changed the entire framework of discussion from specialist versus specialist to seeing all doctors as part of a team, and in the past 2 decades this concept of holistic health has come on strong. It's now common to have individual patient websites, complete with every doctor, prescription, and appointment, and with after-visit summaries. Everyone can see what everyone else is doing. It hasn't solved all problems, of course, as there are still disagreements and doctors still have egos, but it's a much better way to go and everyone realizes it. This has not been a disruptive change, as from the beginning doctors are trained to look at the whole patient first and do what's best overall. They're simply getting back to basics. There was no need to disrespect anyone or any specialty. Everyone kept their worth and dignity. They simply aligned in a higher purpose. When your new perspective moves you more toward reality, there's no downside. So let's get back to the government overview, and I think you'll see where I'm going with this. From the perspective of individual rights, the landscape can look like this. So many different groups, so many different issues, and more coming on all the time. That's the way democracy should work, right? More and more inclusive. But how can you manage all this and still make decisions in a way to keep the flow from stagnating, from moving into dangerous territory? With a bottom line of individuals, I don't think you can. For our democracy to survive, we cannot continue to have a foundational viewpoint of down here, seeing all the pieces first. We need to change our point of view to see the whole, the big picture first. We start here, with the bottom line recognition of connection and alignment, because that's the truth. Then we can consider the individual components from a different perspective, one that gives us a much better chance of working together with the necessary efficiency. Module 6, Revision. Over the last 20 years, about the only thing that Americans have agreed on politically is that the federal government is not working well. Dissatisfaction is at an all-time high, trust at an all-time low. As a direct result of this dysfunctionality, our democracy is under attack as never before. We have a would-be dictator in the White House, backed by oligarchs, with the looming threat of artificially intelligent machine overlords. We are at a critical juncture. So what do we do? The knee-jerk reaction is to do exactly what we've tried to do before, only do it more, do it better. Organize and win the midterms, protect the vote, get big money out of politics, etc., etc. All the while trying to get ourselves fired up to believe that this time it's going to work, and trying hard to ignore the reality that it is so not working. And all the while, afraid of feeling dispirited and hopeless. I'm here to say emphatically that a feeling of hopelessness is exactly what we need to acknowledge and embrace, as it's the only way to a better future. Let me explain. The unquestioned assumption behind the do it more, do it better philosophy is that our government has the best possible design for democracy, and that unexpected and uncontrolled forces have damaged it. So all we need to do is stop the bleeding and patch the wounds, so to speak, and everything will be fine. This line of thinking is completely absurd, and it's time we wake up and realize it. We have had 238 years to see how the design of our country works in the real world, and the only reasonable conclusion is that it is working exactly as designed. Of course, there have been many good things, too numerous to mention, but the dark side is threatening all of us, and it's been there all along. From the beginning, there has been genocide, huge environmental destruction, and massive militarism, and more recently, extreme separation of wealth, poverty, and homelessness. This is not an aberration. This is exactly in line with the narrative we have been enacting. We have collectively created it, and we have only ourselves to blame. And what is the essence of this story? Independence and separation. Individual rights and freedoms as the bottom line. To put it really simply, it's all about me. Now, I don't mean this frivolously. This is truly the fundamental guiding principle. And what is the ultimate expression of a story like this? A delusional narcissist. Someone who was born rich and thinks he made it on his own, independently. Someone who thinks the world revolves around him. Again, this is not an aberration. This is what the story creates. Now, of course, the Declaration of Independence is an extraordinary document and holds a special place in history. And, of course, the individual rights and freedoms that we all cherish are very, very important. But these rights and freedoms are only meaningful in the context of the overall community. We want freedom of speech, but we can't threaten someone's life. We want freedom of movement, but we can't park in someone else's driveway. The common good is always the bottom line, not individual actions. Our foundational story, our mission statement, our guiding principle is wrong. It is backwards, and being backwards can be deadly. Unless it is significantly changed, it will continue to take us in the same direction, on a path of polarization, conflict, destruction, loneliness, and death. It is a dead end. It is hopeless. But the very, very, very good news is that the world is not hopeless. We are not hopeless. Only our story is hopeless. And that story can be changed in an instant with a collective declaration just like it was in 1776. That is what we need to do. Module 7, Realignment. It's important to have a firm grasp of the obvious, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do here. We should have a primary social philosophy that is in line with the reality of the world we live in. And the word that best sums this up is interdependence, not independence. And not just in our human realm, but our entire planet. The words independent and separate have no meaning in the dictionary of life on Earth. Nothing is independent or separate. Everything is interdependent and connected. Our "it's all about me" perspective is bad enough in the human realm, but it's truly lethal when it comes to the community of life on this planet. This is reality, and this is our story. It doesn't fit, and it will never fit. The word supremacy can have a very negative connotation, as in white supremacy or male supremacy. But the absolute worst and deadliest is human supremacy. It's like a stake in the heart of the earth. Our story is killing not only ourselves, but millions of other species as well. and it will continue to do so until we change it and collectively create a different future. So let's change it. We made it up, and we can make up a different one. And let's start here and improve the design of our country. This is not difficult, as we do design upgrades all the time with everything in our lives. And it's really a software change, not a hardware change. Our hardware is terrific. We have an extraordinary land rich in resources, talented, hardworking people, and a brilliant and solid basic governmental structure. But after 238 years, it's time for a major software upgrade. So let's call it America 2.0. And it starts, as you might expect from the nature of this video, with a declaration of interdependence. This is not a new idea, as there are dozens of them on the web. Take a look. The first one of note was entered into the United States Congressional Record in 1945, 80 years ago. It's a concept that has wide support from the public, business, and religious groups, as it's really just an extension of the Golden Rule. It is an idea whose time has come. And it wouldn't be difficult to write, as it can be short and to the point. For example, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all living things on earth, including human beings, are intimately connected and depend on each other for mutual survival. ... Maybe a few more sentences simply describing what is obviously and undeniably true. We can easily do this. Getting it adopted as the law of the land will certainly be a challenge, of course. But it's good to remember that only a minority of people in the colonies supported the Declaration of Independence at the beginning. Most just wanted to do a few fixes to the tax laws and felt that breaking away from England was way too risky. But a few people with courage and vision persisted, and we know the result. Will we need to have a revolution, chaos, battles in the streets? Not at all. And here's a perfect metaphor. 2 cars. One is gas-powered and one is electric. Can you tell which is which? No, and that's the point. The fundamental driving force of each is different, with huge worldwide environmental and social implications, but most of the car is the same. We only change what we need to and keep everything else. The transition is smooth with a minimum of disruption. Our country has a solid governmental structure on the local, state, and federal levels. The improvements we need to make would have a much better chance of success with a new fundamental vision, as the forces that are trying to undermine our system draw strength from the old vision of conflict and separation. With a new direction, we're good to go. Module 8. Why bother? I have been developing these ideas for over 30 years, and in that time I've thought of many reasons why this might be a waste of time or even backfire politically. Skepticism is normal and healthy, so let me address some of the objections that have likely come up for you. It's obvious that I feel that no objection is significant, and that what I propose is the best thing we could do. So let me make my case. It's not a law, and it wouldn't make any real difference. This is probably the biggest one, and the easiest to refute. The Declaration of Independence was not a law, but it made an incredible difference. It is considered as essentially a sacred document, and it's been quoted by people and politicians for the past 250 years. It stands to reason that an updated version would have a similar effect. It would distract from the urgent things we need to do. My response to this is what I said earlier. These things are not working well at all, and it's foolish to continue in the same manner and expect different results. These excellent objectives are all in the spirit of the common good, but with a bottom line of individual rights, it's like swimming against the current. With a new basic context of interdependence and connection, we'd have the current working for us, not against us. We need to focus on resistance to minimize the damage. Yes, we need to fight diligently to save what we have. But we all know that you can never win a game by just playing defense. The best you can hope for is a stalemate. We need to go on offense, be creative and innovative. We need to offer something new and inspiring. The other side would never go for this, and we need to convince them to make any progress. This may seem like a reasonable conclusion, but I feel it's a big mistake to assume that you know what other people are thinking. People that in most cases you've never met. We saw the fallacy of that in the last election. I admit that I have a tendency to think that I'm smarter than everyone else, but I'm not. And if I act in this manner, it only works against me. Despite the prevalence of fake news, reason and common sense can cross barriers and bring people together. I need to take care of myself and my family first. It's got to be all about me, or I won't survive. I agree 100% with the first sentence, as self-interest is the primary drive of all living things. But what's truly best for me and my family is alignment and cooperation with many, many others. I am absolutely doing this for myself and my family. This project is not about changing the psychology or motivation of people. It's about increasing awareness of where our true self-interest lies. It's about ending the collective delusion that allows us to ignore the other people and other species that are crucial to our survival. The future that we are collectively creating is truly frightening, and it's foolish to pretend otherwise. But the most frightening thing is the belief that we are fated to act this way, that the story we are enacting to create this future is the only one possible, that it's our human nature making us do this. Nothing could be further from the truth. Throughout our million years' history, humans everywhere have lived in recognition of their place in the great circle of life, with reverence for the ecosystem that sustains them. Otherwise, they would never have survived. It's only in the last few millennia, as our life support system grew so vast that we lost track of its source, did we develop the story of human supremacy and domination of nature, with its disastrous consequences. In the year 1800, there were an estimated 60 million bison roaming the Great Plains. The native tribes depended a great deal on their meat for food, hides for shelter, and bones for tools, and had hunted them for centuries. But they considered the bison sacred and only took what they needed, allowing all to flourish. By 1889, there were only 541 left, most slaughtered by settlers who considered them not sacred at all, but mere amusement, target practice. 60 million bison killed by a story. That's how deadly it can be. The signers of the Declaration of Independence did not know what the future would hold. They just knew they were doing the right thing. The document did not immediately solve all their problems, as there was much work still to be done. But it started them on the path to something remarkable. Now is our time to show similar vision and courage and build upon what they created. A declaration of interdependence is the right thing to do. It will not immediately solve all our problems, of course, but it will set us on the path to create something remarkable. Imagine all the energy that is currently directed towards separation, exploitation, and domination being redirected to connection, cooperation, and regeneration. Imagine what that could do. Imagine how that would feel. That's the future I want to create, and I ask you to join me.